Welcome back to Black Bear Forge and our countdown till Christmas. It is less than a week away, so we really need to get busy if we're going to get any more Christmas projects done. But again, these are good projects for after Christmas, any time of the year. We're just doing them now to present some options for Christmas gift giving. Today's project is suggested by Granddad's Forge, Roberto Catcarew, I hope I pronounced that right, and David DeGroot. And today we are going to make a corkscrew. We have already made a bottle opener, so if you like soda or beer at Christmas, you have a bottle opener to open that with. But if you're a wine drinker, a corkscrew might come in handy. So let's head over to the forge and I'll show you what I've got in mind. For our corkscrew project, I thought I would start with a piece of material that is 1/2 inch thick, or roughly 13 millimeters, by 1 inch wide, or roughly 25 millimeters. And I want to start by forming a tenon on the end that will eventually turn into the corkscrew. Then we'll cut it off, split it, and the other side will get, that split will form a T-handle, so you can get good leverage to put the corkscrew into the cork on the wine bottle. This is way too long. The length is completely irrelevant at this point. It's just a handle to hold on to while we form that tenon. I'm going to just take about 1 inch of this and butcher in. And this, of course, is way more material than we're going to need in the long run, but it's easier to cut it off than it is to try and add more. So now we'll turn that into a round tenon. It's easier to just start at the edge of the anvil than it is to worry about any kind of tenoning dies. Just be careful not to hit the shoulder while you're forging this. Ultimately, this end is going to get drawn out into a thin wire, and a lot less of it than I have here. So it doesn't hurt if this is not even. I just need to create a shoulder that we can work to when we open up our split on this side. Now I'll go to this set of tenoning or swedge dies, and that way I can push the shoulder right up to the edge of the die and not worry about damaging it with a missed hammer swing, and work right up to the shoulder. So that creates a very nice even round right there. Now you can just go ahead and draw this out a little bit more evenly. And of course you can go back into the guillotine tool with the dies to clean this up if you want to, but it really isn't going to matter. Like I say, at some point before we split this, I want to put it in a heading plate and upset that shoulder a little bit. Plus straighten it up because it's crooked. So I'm just trying to create a little bit more mass right at this base. Next thing I'm going to do is let this cool. I'm going to do some of this cold just for precision's sake. So we'll let it cool. I'm going to drill a hole right where I want the base of my split to be and then hacksaw the split. I'm doing that instead of splitting because I want it to be perfectly centered, perfectly even, and I want nice square bars when I'm done. I'm just going to use my little square here to mark a line. I set it close to halfway, and then I mark the line from both sides, and I get a little parallel line that way. And that way the center is right between the two lines. I'll put my center punch mark there, drill that hole, and then we'll hacksaw this out. This is a fairly reasonable thing to hacksaw. Everybody says they can't cut a straight line. That's just because they don't practice. So the more you use a hacksaw, the better off you'll be with it. And for this one-off project, this will actually be faster than setting up my little portable bandsaw and then putting it away when I'm done. Now I just want to open up the split. Try not to drive your chisel all the way down into the bottom of the hole. That's just a good start there. I'm going to open that up using a fuller so I will be less likely to damage it. I'm try and drive the fuller both sides. Now we can start opening this with a hammer. However, be aware that this space right here may want to create a cold shut. So keep your eye on that, and if need be, work these corners down, and we'll probably do that in the next heat. If you avoid the cold shut early, you'll be better off. The other place we're going to get a cold shut is right here at the edge of this hole. So that's a good place to hot rasp or file or grind or do something before you go too far. I went to the grinder and I cleaned up that inside just a little bit. You can file it, hot rasp it, angle grinder. I just used the belt grinder. And then I took care of a few other rough, ragged places while I was there. Now we'll try to actually forge these corners in so that they don't create cold shuts. So I just want to get in there and clean up that transition. I want the flat bottom T when I get done, but if I start with that little corner there, it just doesn't fill in very well. So I would rather fill it in now and then recreate the corner here as we go. That greatly reduces the risk of a cold shut. The next thing we want to do is go ahead and finish spreading this out. So now that we've greatly reduced the odds of a cold shut, we go ahead and finish spreading this out. Now we started with 1/2 inch material here, but there's no way we're going to end up with 1/2 inch material by the time we're through forging. So I'm going to aim for more like 3/8 square. We need to find a pair of tongs that doesn't get in my way quite so badly. One thing I do want to accomplish is I want to make this straight all the way across here without that little dip where the split was. So we can work that straight down on the anvil to try and clean that up. Well, I cleaned that up really nice. I was going to say we could go back into the heading tool, but I don't think we need to. I will go back into it though just to kind of straighten out where I bent it by upsetting it. But other than that, this is turning into what I want for now. Once we straighten that, I think I'm going to taper these out, and I'm going to scroll one down and scroll one up. That should straighten that up just a little bit. I actually think I might go ahead and draw this stem out a little bit further just because it's way too big everywhere at this point. As you do this, just a side note, think about what this would be like curved up as a C with some little scrolls on the end of it. Think about the S curve I'm talking about. Think about making this much longer and maybe doing a little ram's heads on the ends. Lots and lots of variations you can do on something like this. Before I draw this out, I'm going to go ahead and bow these back out of my way. Now, this may seem silly that I just went through all that work to straighten them, but I wanted to make sure I got rid of that little telltale dip in there, and this will be real easy to straighten back out again. A lot of people have asked to see more of the new power hammer, and as part of these Christmas projects, I've tried to avoid it because I want them to stay pretty simple. But we've looked at all sorts of drawing out as part of these projects, so we know we can do this by hand at the anvil. That's not a surprise. There's nothing new or different about that. So let's just go ahead and take a look at this, and that'll expedite the video for the less interesting portion of it here. Well, that made fairly short work of that. So I've reduced this considerably so it's similar to the T-handle portion there. And then I've started to draw out what will be the corkscrew, and I think we can just cut that off somewhere in here right now. This will still double or triple in length before we're done. So I'm just going to cut that off in the guillotine tool. We'll probably have to trim it again, but that shows pretty much what I'm after at this stage. At this point, I want to go ahead and finish the handle because it'll be way easier to damage the corkscrew portion working on the handle than it will be to damage the handle working on the corkscrew. So we'll start just by straightening out the arm that I bent back up there. Of course, if you like that kind of C shape, you could leave it. And part of me is intrigued by that, but it's not what I set out to do, so I'm going to stay with my original plan at this point. And I'm going to put a taper in this, but I want to leave it pretty much full width for most of it in this direction and taper it more in this direction. This last third or so, I'm going to start tapering in both directions. And eventually this is going to get scrolled up. But I want to be able to match the left side and the right side before I do that. You'll see me come over here to the hardy hole. What I'm doing is I'm just getting a measurement here. If I make that draw out to the edge of my hardy hole, that's a repetitive caliper of sorts. And I can use that to compare the next one. We just do this to the other side, make them the same length. And there again, you can do anything you want with these. Could have left it square and put a little ball finial on the end if you wanted to try to do that. It's pretty much the same length. I'm just going to round up the very end of this. And lightly chamfer the rest of it. That'll just make it more comfortable in the hand and use. I'm going to scroll one end down. And I'm going to kind of droop that entire end of the arm down to match it. Just straighten all that up, and we'll do the other end. We'll do the same thing but upwards. So we start by rounding up the very end. Make sure it's going to be comfortable. And then this one goes upwards. With the same little upsweep in general. That's pretty much what I'm after. I think when we're all done, I'm going to put a little S-curve this direction that makes it a little bit more comfortable to turn. So I'm going to start over the horn. We can certainly go back to the power hammer. This new hammer has the finesse to draw something out that fine, but we'll still try to limit its use in most of the beginner videos. It cools down quick, so make sure you take the time to reheat it. I think going to the face of the anvil next and cleaning that up, making it good and parallel before we round it would be the way to go here. So I just want to get in here and clean up the shoulder and try and make this into an even parallel bar here. The very tip can be pointed, but I still wonder if this is way too much material. But since I'm not sure, I guess I'll go ahead and point this. And then if we need to trim it, I'll just have to file a new point in after the screw is done. So that's our square bar now. Let's take this down to an octagon and then round. We'll knock the corners down to make it an octagon. The more of a true octagon you make it, the easier it is to round these up. And it becomes very critical if you're working in wrought iron. Now this is going to be another one of those things that I think the smoother and cleaner this is, the better off you are in the long run. Whatever you want to do to polish this up so it's nice and smooth, it'll go into the wine cork a little bit easier. Less likely to tear it up. Nobody likes little bits of cork in their wine. So I'm going to go ahead and take this to the belt grinder. I'll be right back. I went ahead and cleaned that up on the belt grinder. It's down to a 220 finish. There are very few hammer marks left in this, so it should have a nice smooth action when you're opening your wine bottle. This does taper a little bit. It's about 1/8 of an inch down here, and it's about 3/16 of an inch up here. Not really a big deal, I hope. I'm going to go ahead and leave it. After I use it once or twice, I'll find out if it really works. And again, I don't know if this is the right length. I doubt that it's too short. My guess is it might be too long, if anything. Right now we are at 5 inches from the shoulder to the point, which corresponds to about 125, maybe closer to, depending on where you measure from, maybe 130 centimeters, or excuse me, 130 millimeters. I know some of you guys like the metric measurements, and I know I screw them up a lot, so if you don't like me screwing them up, I'll just quit doing it. If you want me to keep trying to do it, sooner or later I'll figure out how to read the second language on the ruler there. So the next thing I want to do is I want to put a 90-degree bend in this, and then we want to roll it up into a spiral with about a 1/2 to 3/8 inside diameter. So I'm going to start just by putting a 90-degree bend up here at the top. And then I want to roll this up, starting at the end, I think will be easiest. But we have to think about this a little bit. Corkscrews typically are a right-hand thread. It'd be easy to roll this up backwards. Now, if this is a gag gift for your favorite wine connoisseur, maybe that's okay, but I think I'd like it to work correctly. So I want to turn it this way. So I want to start in this orientation. I want to start by rolling this point up. And of course, as you do this, you want to make sure that the point ends up on the bottom end and not tucked up on the top. And there's going to be some of this with a hammer at the anvil, or hammer on the face of the anvil. And we can take another heat here. I think we're going to wrap that just a little bit tighter so we get a few more coils on there. I'm going to start just by getting into that first coil and just tighten things up a little bit. This is where working with a hammer will ultimately be easier, I think. But that's starting to be just what we're after. By going to the hammer to do this, you can really make some fine adjustments. The pliers are nice, but they're not the end-all be-all. I think I want to try and get this more in line here before I show you the next step. Well, it's much better, much more central. Like so many of these projects, the more of these you make, the easier a lot of these steps become, and you start to see what has to happen before you get to the point that it's fiddly and fussy. Okay, so there's a nice little pigtail forged on the end of our handle, but that's absolutely useless for opening a bottle of wine. It's never going to thread down through the cork. So what are we going to do with it? Yeah, let's go to the vise and I'll show you. Handle in the vise, and grab the very point and just extend that screw upwards, and hopefully it goes nice and evenly. Looks like it's straightened a little bit more here, so I've got a little bit of repair to do, and then I'm going to need to pull that side out a little bit more. That helped that look better. I think using the vise to make sure that's straight and all in line really helps. That's pretty much it. Now pretty much this is what I've been after. It's what I saw in my head in my mental design phase early this morning. This is a little uneven the way it uncoiled as we extended it, and that's because of the taper. If I had taken the time to get this exactly parallel, I think that would have gone a little bit smoother. I also think it's probably a little bit big and clunky, so certainly being more on the small end probably would have helped. The next thing I want to do is put a little bit of an S-bend in here. I think it'll make it a little bit more comfortable to use. Plus it just looks good. I think that's really all I want to do to that other than give it a good wire brushing. You can certainly clean these up as much as you want, file them bright and shiny, put some decorative file work or chisel work on them. Lots of room for artistic expression on what otherwise is a fairly simple kitchen implement. Thanks for the idea. I had fun making this project. I hope you had fun watching the video. Give it a thumbs up if you did. If you haven't done so already, I would love it if you hit that subscribe button. Feel free to stick around, watch a few of the other videos, share the videos with your friends. Make sure you don't drink too much wine this Christmas season, and don't drink any wine if you're going to be working in the shop. And by all means, don't drink and drive. Stay safe, wear your safety glasses. We'll see you for the next one.